What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got another live fantasy football mock draft for you. We're on ESPN. It's a 10-team standard mock draft where we have the fifth pick overall. Quickly, before we get into it, since we have some time, reminder for you guys, check out the all new and updated website at alldaypigskin.com and get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Great value. You get everything you could possibly want in terms of rankings, projections, tiers, player bios, and fantasy advice. All the details in the description. But let's get back to this draft because the first pick has been made, and as you would expect, Christian McCaffrey, even if it is a standard format, McCaffrey will have a very high likelihood to continue to be that 101. Now, personally, I'd probably be a little bit more on board to take Saquon Barkley 101 in a standard mock draft. But again, I think you're really splitting hairs here when you're going McCaffrey and or Saquon Barkley. I think both these guys will be studs. Sure, there's going to be some regression, but at the end of the day, there's no reason why they can't both be top 5 running backs. But this is really where it's going to get interesting with the 4th, 5th picks overall, because normally you'd probably say, okay, in Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, slam dunk picks here. But Kamara, he has a lot of value as a PPR running back. He's yet to get over 1,000 yards rushing, so these things have to be considered. In fact, I love how this draft played out because Dalvin Cook just went 4th overall, and I was going to say that Dalvin Cook at the 5 would have been my selection without a doubt. Now I have to make the decision between Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Derrick Henry. Normally, I would go ahead and pass on someone like Derrick Henry in a PPR format or even in a half-point PPR format, but because he has such high value, such high touchdown upside, and because the offense goes through him in Tennessee, he's going to be my pick here at the 105 in this standard mock draft. Kamara, very tempting, don't get me wrong, but again, he is much more of a PPR suited running back. Michael Thomas as well. I mean, he'll get you over 100 receptions, but you're not going to get those 100 plus points going your way. So how much really is the separation then becomes the question between a Michael Thomas and a Devontae Adams, or really any of the other top wide receivers. That's why I'm okay waiting on the wide receivers potentially in the second round. But after our Derrick Henry selection, Miles Sanders off the board with the 106. That's probably the earliest I've ever seen Miles Sanders go, considering some of the other running backs that are still on the board. Let's go ahead and specifically sort it out that way. You've still got a Josh Jacobs, you've still got a Joe Mixon, a Nick Chubb. I think both those guys, that group of players that we just mentioned could potentially be running backs that you take over Miles Sanders. So a little bit interesting, but I understand the upside. I'm excited about Miles Sanders as well, but a little bit more so in PPR formats. The only point being, afterwards, you see the run on wide receivers a little bit with Michael Thomas at 107. Alvin Kamara then goes at 108, a good value pick at that point. So I don't fault that at all. Then Tyreek Hill at the 109. And this is where it's going to get interesting. We're going to start to get some value here. Let's see if one of these top wide receivers can fall to us. And as soon as I say that, of course, we have back-to-back wide receiver selections, Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins. But we'll see, maybe Julio Jones can drop to us, or a Mike Evans. I wouldn't mind that. But again, as soon as we say that, both those guys, or at least Julio Jones, is off the board. What I'm really hoping for here is that Josh Jacobs falls to us, potentially Joe Mixon as well. I really love Kenyon Drake, but in a PPR format as well. Kind of falls in that Alvin Kamara category for me. And wow, of course, right there, we get sniped of Josh Jacobs. He would have been my guy, no questions about it. Now, I could go wide receiver here, but let's look at some of the other wide receivers that are still on the board that are good, standard options. You've got Godwin, Evans, Galladay, Cooper down there. So I'm going to go running back again, actually. And the running back that I'm going to go with is probably Joe Mixon here. I'm scared of Aaron Jones in the regression. Kenyon Drake, again, I like, but he's more PPR suited. So for that reason, I'm going Mixon here. And right off the board, I've got Derrick Henry, I've got Joe Mixon. That is a combination that I like. Yes, there's some question marks with Joe Mixon in terms of having a rookie under center with Joe Burrow, and I acknowledge that. But I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice, see what happens. Either way, Mixon definitely has that top 10 potential, and he's a good volume running back, even if he lacks a little bit as a pass catcher. But again, that is not that important of a category in these standard mock drafts. Another reason why someone like an Austin Eckler is still available, for example. But let's go back to our big board. So as it stands right now, if there's any auto picks at this point in time, it means that Mike Evans will not get back to us. It means that probably Kenny Golladay will not get back to us. But we've seen stranger things happen, and there's an outside chance that maybe one of those two guys will drop to us. I mean, we definitely should be going wide receiver here, theoretically. But if an Austin Eckler is available to us in the third round, it's going to be tough to pass up. I realize he's, again, one of these PPR type of suited running backs. But Austin Eckler in the third round, that's very good value. And it's getting closer and closer to being a reality. And this pretty much guarantees with that Todd Gurley selection that just took place that we're going to have our choice between Evans, Eckler, and Golladay, one of those guys. So I'm pretty happy with how this is potentially going to play out for us in this third round. Let's go ahead and look at some of these other picks before the Todd Gurley. You saw DJ Moore, you saw Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. All good picks. You know, I do think DJ Moore and Allen Robinson are much more suited for PPR scoring. So for that reason, there'd be other wide receivers that I take over them. In fact, I think it's kind of a travesty that DJ Moore and Allen Robinson were selected before Mike Evans and or Kenny Golladay. So I find that a little bit puzzling. Then you see Todd Gurley, as we mentioned. I do like the upside with Gurley. Then Chris Carson, another one of these standard running backs. And I think we just hit the jackpot, folks, because Mike Evans is still available for us here in the third round. You know, he's, again, a good standard type of suited wide receiver. I have him as a borderline top 5 wide receiver across all formats, so I'm really high on him. It's tempting to go Austin Eckler. It definitely is, but there's also incredible value here with Mike Evans. So for that reason, it also fits a bigger area of need for me. I'm going to go Mike Evans here, and I have zero problem doing so. Austin Eckler would have been my next choice, but I absolutely love the way that this standard mock draft has started for us. And our first 3 picks, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Mike Evans. If that Joe Mixon pick was Josh Jacobs, I would honestly say that we have hit the jackpot in terms of every single pick in these first 3 rounds. And this could be a nice blueprint to follow for, you know, for your own respective mock drafts, depending on how these rankings fluctuate in the future. But again, let's go back to the pick history here, because after Mike Evans, we see George Kittle, then Austin Eckler. You know, we knew he wasn't going to last all that long, so it's a pick that makes sense. Then Lamar Jackson, first quarterback off the board here with the 8th pick in the third round, and then Patrick Mahomes follows suit. Kenny Golladay with the 10th pick in the third round. We knew he wasn't going to come back to us. Then Leonard Fournette, a running back that I was considering in the 4th round potentially when looking at value. Just looking at some of these other running backs, you know, we've got a David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell is the next best ranked running backs, but both those guys more PPR upside than in standard formats. So their floor definitely lower here. So I'm going to avoid them. Melvin Gordon, again, I'm going to avoid. James Conner, I think I could potentially get later. He's been a guy that I've been targeting across all of my leagues. So I'm going to shift my attention back to wide receiver. Let's see if there's anything interesting on the tight end board. But yeah, again, pretty much with Kittle and Travis Kelce off the board, I'm not going to be reaching on a tight end, I should say, rather, at this point in time. I'm going to go back to the wide receiver list. We've seen Adam Thielen go, Amari Cooper go. Cooper was going to be my selection if he was there with this 4th round pick. But right now, we've got a chance to go ahead and choose between a Juju Smith and AJ Brown and Odell Beckham. And I'm someone that actually believes that Odell Beckham is fairly undervalued this year. And with him returning healthy, with the Cleveland Browns having made some improvements on that offensive line, I'm okay taking a chance on Odell Beckham this year. I think in the 4th round is pretty good value. So that's what I'm going with here. You could argue that maybe he would have been available to us in the 5th round, but I'm just going to go ahead and grab him here while I can. I know there's a lot of mouths to feed, but Odell was still getting a lot of targets last year. So I think we'll be okay with that selection. If it wasn't Odell, it was going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, our other wide receiver that I was considering. Let's go back to the big board, however, and look at what is going on here. After that Odell selection, like we said, you've got Juju Smith-Schuster. Jonathan Taylor was right before that. You know, a run on these rookie running backs, maybe a little bit. AJ Brown now. So honestly, right now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 picks to go until our selection. And ideally, I'd be looking at someone like a Calvin Ridley or a Robert Woods to fill my flex spot. I think very good value for both of those guys. You know, running back, I did mention James Conner, and he's going to be tempting, but we'll see how this plays out. It'll be between those players that we just mentioned in Calvin Ridley, Robert Woods, and James Conner. Calvin Ridley just went off the board, so our selection unfortunately got a lot easier. Hopefully we still have one of those options available to us. And I know maybe to some extent we target some of these players a lot in our mock drafts, but I think we've actually done a good job of kind of diversifying the roster in this mock compared to others. You know, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, I don't think we've really ever targeted those guys, but since it's a standard format, they've got much higher upside. Mike Evans, you know, he's someone that I target always, but in the 3rd round, that's incredible value getting Mike Evans. There was no chance I was going to pass up on him. And then Odell, someone that in the 4th round, I don't mind taking a chance on. And I think his upside, again, is bigger than people realize. So I'm very happy with how this has played out. Cooper Kupp just got selected. Interestingly enough, David Montgomery got selected a little bit earlier. He was someone that I was potentially going to point out and say, well, maybe he falls to us in the 6th round. And I was going to say, if we go Robert Woods instead of James Conner, I'd be all right going with David Montgomery afterwards. But since David Montgomery just got selected, that pretty much locks up me taking James Conner here. I know he's a bit of a risky pick in terms of injury, but at this point in time, I always say this when projecting fantasy football players for the upcoming season. What is their current state? Currently, James Conner is healthy. Currently, Big Ben is healthy. Currently, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a great offensive line. For that reason, I'm all in on James Conner. I think he's got that Dalvin Cook type of breakout season in him. He's done it before. So, again, I'm all in on James Conner. And getting him in the 5th round, I think that's pretty good value. Now, let's go ahead and look at some of these picks that just took place because it was pretty rapid fire. You saw DeAndre Swift, Courtland Sutton, good value there in Courtland Sutton. Mark Andrews, there goes Robert Woods, like we mentioned. Devin Singletary, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf. So the 2 Seattle wide receivers, one right after the other. I don't think that's too crazy. I think that makes sense. Right now, this is getting back to us, and there's 2 wide receivers that I really like in T.Y. Hilton and Devontae Parker. I'd probably prioritize Devontae Parker a little bit more so because I just think he's going to get more volume. And as soon as we say that both those guys are taken off the board, well, that's how it works out sometimes. So for better or for worse, we got to go ahead and pivot. So I'm not going to lie to you guys, Darren Waller is a tight end that I really like, but again, maybe more so in PPR formats. So here we can go best player available. That would be Keenan Allen. But again, with the Tyrod Taylor situation, with Keenan Allen being more of a PPR type of wide receiver, I'm okay looking somewhere else. And I'm not going to go that far because DJ Shark is a wide receiver that I think being the second or actually third wide receiver on our team, is a good point for him. He's the number one wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had success with Minshew last season. At this point, he's a depth pick that is going to be on our bench, but I think he could very well be a starting wide receiver, if this was a two flex type of situation. So I'm happy with the pick there. Would I have been happier with Devontae Parker or T.Y. Hilton? Yes, because I trust the quarterbacks there more so, but DJ Chark is not a bad consolation prize nonetheless. Now, let's go ahead and kind of start planning out some of our future picks here. And Keenan Allen was the pick right afterwards. So again, a great value pick for whoever selected him afterwards. But again, I did think DJ Chark made a little bit more sense considering the format here. And if you want a wide receiver that's very similar to Keenan Allen, for what it's worth, with that similar type of upside, look at Julian Edelman with Cam Newton. He's going to be someone that I'm targeting. He's right over here, ranked 85th overall. His ADP has not caught up to his situation quite yet, so keep that in mind. But Darren Waller, he is still available to us. That's pretty interesting. I know I said that I value him a little bit more so in PPR formats, which that's still the case, but I still think he has a pretty high ceiling out of all the tight ends that are still left. In fact, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, those are my top two tight ends available at this point in time. Evan Ingram, a little bit more of an injury risk. So again, I wouldn't mind taking a chance on Darren Waller for that reason. There's, potentially quarterback here going with a Kyler Murray. But I'm perfectly fine waiting on a quarterback, on a Drew Brees, on a Matt Ryan, on a Tom Brady, on a Josh Allen. So I'm going to go ahead and probably select Darren Waller here. Let's go ahead and look at some of these other players that we could potentially be passing up on. Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, I'm all right passing up on those guys in favor of Darren Waller. Some other, let's go ahead and sort it out. Other running backs, Kareem Hunt. He's much more valuable in PPR scoring, so I'm going to pass on him. Wide receivers, Michael Gallup, like we said, Debo, Julian Edelman. I think Julian Edelman will be available for us afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Darren Waller here. I like that pick in the 7th round. I think it's a good value pick. I think he's going to be an upper echelon tier 2 tight end. And just to be safe afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and grab a second tight end. One of those, high-end tier 3 group of guys like a Mike Gesicki, like a Hayden Hurst, like a Jack Doyle. Just a couple, for example, that I think could very well be starting tight ends in case Darren Waller does not pan out. Now, some picks that happened afterwards, you see J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, Keyshawn Vaughn. So a run on the rookies, Ronald Jones, Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, Kareem Hunt. So kind of going just the best available players, a little bit of a streak there. Now, I could go quarterback here. I definitely could. Or I could continue to build our bench out. Kyler Murray just got drafted. Raheem Mostert got drafted. So to some extent, that, takes away the running back that I would have been considering with Raheem Mostert. It takes away the quarterback I would have been considering with Kyler Murray. So let's actually go wide receiver here. I told you guys that the situation with Julian Edelman, his ADP has not adjusted to his situation. As soon as that Cam Newton signing happened, Julian Edelman's ADP skyrocketed, but not a lot of platforms have adjusted. So I'm going to go ahead and take Julian Edelman here, get some depth. We did start running backs early, so getting some more wide receivers here, stockpiling them makes a lot of sense. And honestly, this is where Julian Edelman should be getting drafted. I realize he's more of a PPR type of wide receiver, but he's still the number one wide receiver for the New England Patriots. And, look at last season. He was a top 15 wide receiver in standard scoring, so I'm all right getting that in the 8th round. I don't think the projections are going to be all that different with Cam throwing him the football potentially versus Tom Brady. So Julian Edelman there, I'm very okay with. Honestly, he should probably have been selected earlier than that point. Now we'll see, maybe there will be a little bit of a run on quarterbacks. We'll see if that gamble paid off because we do need a quarterback to kind of round out this roster and be able to grade it out. We're not going to go this, this full thing here in terms of the draft, the full 16 rounds. No point in dissecting defenses or kickers and going that deep on the bench. We've already got 2 bench spots, in fact. So let's kind of look at our overall roster. Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, very happy with the way that started. Then Mike Evans, I think that was a slam dunk pick. I think that might be one of the most valuable picks so far in the entire draft, definitely for my roster. Then we went Odell Beckham in the 4th round. James Conner, good value on James Conner as well. Darren Waller, I'm happy with that selection. So I really like the way this is played out. We've got DJ Shark, a high-end wide receiver too. Julian Edelman, someone that's going to get a lot of targets. I really like how we bounce back, especially at the wide receiver position after going running back heavy in the first 2 rounds. Honestly, guys, if this was my own, actual draft, if it wasn't a mock, I would absolutely love the way that this thing has played out, and I'd be all in on this team. Brandon Cooks just got selected. Great value there. He would have been someone that I considered at the next pick that we have here, but this pretty much guarantees that we're going to go quarterback. So let's go ahead and select one of our top choices. It's either going to be Matt Ryan or Drew Brees. I have one of those guys right after the other, and both are available. Matt Ryan is currently higher on my list, so Matt Ryan will be the selection for us here in the 9th round. Do keep in mind that probably Matt Ryan in the 9th round might be a little bit of a stretch, just because every platform has their quarterbacks ranked differently, and I continue to point this out. ESPN does have just their quarterbacks after Lamar and Patrick Mahomes ranked pretty low. So keep that in mind, if you're drafting on Yahoo or NFL or wherever it is that isn't ESPN. But so far, man, I love this roster. I feel as if this could be an A type of roster. I really do. And I realize it's a 10-team league, so there's going to be a lot of depth on a lot of teams, and there's going to be a lot of studs on a lot of these teams as well. But all things considered, I think we're faring pretty well, and we should be one of the top rosters in this theoretical league. I can go ahead and quickly go through some of these other rosters, maybe in between selections, but let's go ahead and quickly queue up a potential another player here before our next selection is up. And looking at value here and some potential players, I do like a Sony Michel as a potential pick. Get some more depth at the running back position. And again, he's another guy with the addition of a Cam Newton that I think gets a nice bump in usage and in ceiling and in projections. So I'm happy with that. Jordan Howard is someone that you could potentially consider, but what's going to be the situation there with him and Matt Breida? So I'm kind of going to avoid it. Jamison Crowder, someone that I really like, but more so again in PPR format. Sony Michel is that prototypical standard scoring running back, so I'm all right taking him here. Yes, James White will take away some of his opportunities. Yes, Cam Newton will take away some of those opportunities, but not like in years previous. Cam Newton, I don't think will, have all that many rushing yards. Between 300, 400 rushing yards probably would be a fair approximation, but it's not like in years past where he's had 500, 600, something like that. So we're on the clock, and we're going to stay true to our word. Select Sony Michel here. And man, I love the depth. I love the starting roster. Let's go ahead and compare to some of these other teams. This is a team with Deshaun Watson, Christian McCaffrey, Le'Veon Bell, DJ Moore, Allen Robinson. So immediately what stands out here, this is a PPR type of scoring roster. So for that reason, I don't really like it all that much. You've got Rob Gronkowski as your starting tight end, Melvin Gordon as your starting flex, Mark Ingram. I would take our team rather than this one for sure. Then here, Russell Wilson, Saquon, Todd Gurley. Okay, this is an interesting team. I think this team has a lot of potential. I actually really like it. Saquon, Todd Gurley, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley, Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz, he's an interesting piece. David Montgomery. I actually really like this team. Jarvis Landry, Kerryon Johnson, some good depth. So I think this should be another upper echelon team. I definitely like what they have going here. Then Dak, Zeke, a nice little stack there. Kenyon Drake, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin. So not as much depth here at the wide receiver position. A lot of depth at the running backs, so that's nice. But afterwards, they have gone wide receiver heavy, so that's pretty nice here. I like that. So let's keep this going. Tom Brady, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones, Juju, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Keenan Allen. Some good pieces here as well. I'm not all that high on Aaron Jones. Cooper Kupp, again, maybe more of a PPR scoring wide receiver. Keep those things in mind with Tyler Higbee as well. So really investing in that Rams offense, which is a little bit scary. But let's get back to our roster. We are on the clock here and look at some of these options in the 11th round. Let's just go ahead for the sake of adding one of those tight ends. I'm going to go with one of my favorite late round tight ends in Jack Doyle here. So get that taken care of, and then we can look at some other wide receivers potentially that have some nice upside, maybe a Darius Slayton, maybe a Preston Williams. Just a couple names to throw out there, Brashad Perriman, So those are all available options. Hunter Renfrow, also not a bad name to consider. Yeah, so those are some really intriguing players. I really like a Justin Jefferson, but again, more so in PPR scoring. Let's continue that roster breakdown with the teams after us. Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs here. Really like the running backs, but I do think Miles Sanders was a reach. Then Will Fuller. Yeah, this really goes south at the wide receivers afterwards. I don't like Jonathan Taylor as a starting flex, so I'd take our roster over this one. Then here we've got Kyler Murray, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers. Ooh, that's rough as your starting running back. Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, Travis Kelce. Yeah, that makes up for it nicely, but again, I think you've got a big hole at that starting running back position, and you don't have all that much running back depth, so that could be a major issue for this team, considering that Austin Eckler is also a PPR type of running back. Then we are back on the clock here. So let's look at some of these other running backs. I'm curious if a Marlon Mack is still available. He is. I think that's incredible value to get him here at this point in time. Don't think the separation between him and Jonathan Taylor will be all that much. As long as he stays healthy, it should be a 1-2 punch that behind that offensive line should be pretty potent. So all in all, let's see to what point we had gotten with looking at these rosters. The Austin Eckler team. So a couple more to go. Lamar Jackson, Alvin Kamara, Keyshawn Vaughn. That's a little bit rough. So I like the wide receivers, but again, similar problem to the previous team. You've got a starting running back where you're relying on a rookie. That's a little bit worrisome. Then Patrick Mahomes, Nick Chubb, David Johnson, Tyreek, Robert Woods, Evan Ingram, DK Metcalf. Not bad. I like Patrick Mahomes, Nick Chubb. Again, not bad. David Johnson, not bad, a little bit more suited for PPR. The wide receivers, nothing all that special. So, again, I like what we've got going on in terms of our roster. I think basically having gone over all these teams, it should be a roster that, that can contend. So let's go ahead and pretty much wrap this thing up and go through our own roster one last time. We've got Matt Ryan, who I think will be a top 5 quarterback. Derrick Henry should be a top 5 running back, especially in standard formats. Joe Mixon, good value where we got him towards the end, middle of the second round. Mike Evans, great value. Odell, pretty good value as well. James Conner as a flex. Darren Waller as a starting tight end. I really like that. DJ Shark, some good value. Julian Edelman, great value. Sony Michel, Jack Doyle, Marlon Mack, Hunter Renfrow. I really like this team, guys. I think it's an A type of team as far as giving it a grade. Let me know what you guys think. Did you guys think we found some value with these picks? Are there players that maybe you aren't as high on? Let us hear it in the comment section along with any other questions you guys might have. And as always, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you guys enjoyed, and check out the website like we mentioned at alldaypigskin.com. Get yourself a copy of the 2020 ADP Fantasy Football Draft Guide. All the details in the description. But for now, we'll see you guys in future videos.